hit it.
Are you sure it's recording? Is there a little thingy going? Okay. Reiteration. What do you think was the biggest moment of your life?
That's a hard question to answer.
There could be more
Top
than one.
three.
Yeah.
There were lots that I found very special. Trying to think. Like getting my my graduate degree at Cornell was hard for me. So
It
that
was?
was yes.
Why? In what regard?
I'm-
No, I'm just surprised to hear that it was hard for you.
Oh, I came very close to flunking my qualifying exam.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Gee, I don't feel alone now.
I didn't think you would have flunked anything.
What?
You flunking or nearly flunking something is like baffling to me. I don't know.
I'm not the world's greatest physicist, and not really the world's greatest anything, but good enough at a large number of things that that turned out to be valuable in itself. No, well, let me ramble on a little and see if that's interesting. After graduating from MIT, along with a couple of buddies, we worked for the summer at Brookhaven National Laboratory, which was building a nuclear reactor, which was a big new thing in those days. Don't forget, we were not many years after the whole atomic bomb thing was going on. And one of the conclusions I reached during that summer was that I had to go to graduate school. So in fact, the three of us together, my two buddies and I, Jules and Bob Margulies was the third, and the three of us decided to go to Cornell, at least partly because of one extraordinary man on the faculty there, who I signed up as my graduate advisor, but he and I never connected, and I never saw him until the time of my qualifying exam, which was, I forget exactly, but a year and a half or 2 years in. Before with that, I'd been taking courses and doing all right.
Who was that, Grandpa? Who was
Robert R. Wilson was his name. He had been head of experimental physics at Los Alamos during the war. And he and a lot of his associates, colleagues, went, and some of the other major figures from the Los Alamos physics department went to Cornell after the war. And so there were pretty extraordinary people there for at least a few years. And so it was recommended to me by some wise people that I should go study with Bob Wilson, which I did, although I never saw him. I guess you see your thesis advisor later on when you get to the point of doing a thesis. But to get from that early stage to the later stage comes the qualifying exam. And so I went and had the qualifying exam, and he asked a bunch of perfectly fair questions, but things I'd never done before or never, had no practice in or anything, and I stumbled along as best I could for the length of the exam, which I don't know how exactly and how long, at the end of which they decided, well, they didn't want to flunk me, but they didn't want to pass me either, and that I should come back and meet with Wilson in one of his offices. It's a little strange that I had never been in his office, and here I was, year and a half or 2 years in as his student.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been resentful of that since then, because if I'd had some practice doing the kind of thing that he wanted me to do, I would have done better. So I went in and met with him and had a sort of a repeat of the same thing, of deer in the headlights, partly, and partly because, well, the questions were perfectly fair. They were coming at things. They wanted me to make calculations of things of a kind that I'd never done before or seen before. So Bob Wilson, who was at least this smart, apparently had made preparations for what he saw coming. And so he said, I won't continue with you as my graduate student because of what I've seen here. But I'm going to turn you over to one of the other professors named Boyce McDaniel, who also came up from Los Alamos. Your coursework has been good and everything we know about you is good. But we noticed that you also have been carrying along a minor in engineering administration, I think it was called, or business administration, something like that. And he said, you're not going because you don't want to have a career in theoretical physics or experimental physics. You're going to do something in industry, and which is true. So he says, I think it'll manage to work out, and I'll turn you over to Boyce McDaniel, and we'll go from there. So as I said, I didn't pass it, but I didn't flunk it. And so, yes, I continued with Boyce McDaniel. He oversaw my thesis. It turned out to be a difficult experimental thesis, but I did it, and I'm certainly proud of that. I've always been a little resentful that I had no interaction with my thesis advisor or whatnot at all.
That makes no sense.
And even with Boyce McDaniel, except for one night when my father came up to visit, I hadn't been to his home or anything like that, which is not the picture you have of a graduate advisor.
Did you know if that was common, Grandpa? Or
What?
did you know if that was a common
I don't
occurrence?
know, or whether that was a result of the Los Alamos experience from these guys. I really don't know the reason why that was that way.
But it wasn't just with you, right? It was with.
I don't even know the answer to that question.
It's kind of such a sink or
So,
swim mentality.
I did finish up my graduate degree. I finished the thesis, and of course, when you get to your final exam, it's about what you did on your thesis, and you better know more about that than anybody else in the world, and you do, and so that was fine. So, but after the final exam, and they were satisfied with me there, when I walked out of the final exam, there was Joan. Now, she wasn't up at graduate school with me at that time, but my parents had arranged for her to come up and be there when I finished my exam. And Joan has always resented the fact that I didn't even notice her, because I came out of the exam. Came out of the exam, and there she was.
And you didn't run then? What's the matter with you?
Grandpa, all you were doing was taking the test of your life, for God's sake.
Yeah. But, so yeah, that was a big moment to get that behind me. And I've thought about it a lot I know I'm not the best physicist because I see what other people do. And Wilson himself, I learned a ton from him just by being around him, watching what he did. We had a journal club, I think we called it, every Friday afternoon where somebody would present either his own work or something interesting in the literature, and everybody would ask questions. And Bob Wilson taught me this is a very smart kind of, not really warm guy, but a crusty kind of guy. And he was absolutely unafraid to ask questions of any kind. He absolutely didn't fear asking a stupid question, for example. If he wanted to know something, he asked. That was a worthwhile lesson all by itself. So I learned a lot about how he thought about the work and how he dealt with questions of that kind. But thereafter, I've never been afraid to, if I want to know something, I'll ask. And if it's stupid, that's too bad, but I wanted to know.
Yep.
So I did learn a lot from being around Bob Wilson and being in his nuclear portion of the physics department. But I was always disappointed that I never had anything like the
A mentor.
mentor experience that you're led to believe is what you
Yeah.
should have.
Huh.
I do not think I have disgraced the Cornell Graduate School in
Oh,
my
good.
career.
Excuse me.
Do you remember what your thesis was on?
Yes. It was even the title is a tough one. The photo production of deuterons from carbon by 190 MeV gamma rays.
Wow.
That's what I guessed.
I kind
Wow.
of
I
remember
understood
seeing
more
that. It
of
was
it.
typed on onion skin, right? In a sort of
Yes.
semi-hard.
Yes.
I remember seeing
In
that.
those days,
I didn't know what it was, but
I still have it upstairs.
yeah, okay.
If it hasn't faded. But it was typed
Yeah.
by the wife of one of the other junior professors
Oh,
who we paid to do it. And she typed, I think, 5 copies or something like that with carbon paper.
yeah.
But it was published in a slightly altered version with drawings that I made myself. And so I have that upstairs too. But so that's a long answer to a short question.
I did not know any of that.
Not sure I've told anybody. Now, I have to say, there are a limited number of times in my life when people have really helped me. And by that I mean not just general help, but I felt alone and distraught and something terrible had happened or was threatening to happen. And as an example, when Grandma got sick in Boston.
Joan.
Excuse me. You're right. When Joan got sick before we left
Oh.
Boston,
I know what you're going to say.
Alan, her brother, showed up the next morning at my front door.
Yeah.
Uninvited, no warning, nothing. He just showed up to help me. And I've been perpetually grateful to him ever since.
Yep.
I've had 4 or 5 such kinds of incidents that really helped me in a deep way. And one of them was when I came back from almost flunking my qualifying exam. You can imagine how I felt walking back to where Joan and I lived. And she was excellent. She really supported me terrifically then.
Oh.
I needed it, and she was wonderful. So she gets one of my 4 or 5 marks.
Okay.
Who was the most influential person in your life?
think I have to say my father.
I knew that was gonna be the answer. I figured that. Yeah.
Understandably, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, absolutely.
I feel like I don't really know a whole lot about him
What
besides
would you
the
say
fact that-
are the top things you learned from him?
Not sure I can put it in that kind of a way, but he was always there. He was supportive. He was understanding. He listened. He was a little more part of my life than I knew sometimes. Spent a summer in the Army Chemical Corps Reserve, during which part of which we went down to, as a part of the ROTC program, went down to Edgewood Arsenal for a number of weeks. I forget exactly how many, and during which time it had become tradition for the summer guests, the summer cadets, to publish a little magazine on the events of the summer. And since I was experienced, since I was the editor of the Tech and Engineering News at MIT, I had the connections and knew what you had to do, so I was, well, it sort of fell on me to collect the stuff and do it. And so I ended up sending a package to the publisher I had worked with. And as it turns out, he overran my budget, and I wasn't smart enough to send instructions to say, this overruns the budget, cut here and cut there. And so the publisher ended up somehow sending a bill to Major Lane, who ran our ROTC unit. And Lane apparently must have been in contact with my father before that point. I don't know why or how, but Major Lane, without saying anything at all to me, contacted Pa, who made up the difference in the bill, and it all went away quietly. And Pa never mentioned this.
How did you find out?
I don't know.
How'd you
So there have been 2 or 3 cases where I had a childhood buddy named Joel Cass, who he and I were very close, and this must have been somewhere up to the second year up to 8th grade, I would say. And then Joel got sick, went into the hospital, and I went and visited him. He was cheerful, but when I went back to visit him a couple of weeks later, I was intercepted by his mother, who softly told me that Joel was going to die. He had leukemia, blood cancer, and had been getting massive treatments of x-rays to try to stop it, but he died. And so that was something I had to digest one way or another. But I also found out that although I hadn't made the contact, my folks were in contact with his mother, who was a divorced mom, and a very nice woman, and they were helping her just to get through what she was getting through, and I think helped her financially too. I don't know. But there have been several such instances where my folks, primarily my father, was keeping an eye on me and sort of watching me as a guardian angel without ever mentioning it to me. He was intellectually strong, would have been a scientist or engineer had that been popular when he was younger. Ended up being a lawyer because someone during his youth had said he talks so much he ought to be a lawyer. So, but I have to say he was the principal influence.
Do you have any regrets in your career or things that you wanted to do that you didn't do?
Yeah, I have a principal regret in my career. I hugely enjoyed and felt I contributed to General Electric's entry into the nuclear reactor business. This is again in the context of shortly after World War II, and making electric power from nuclear power was a big new challenge, and we did that. But in doing so, I got entangled with computers as they were in those days, because for the particular kind of reactor we were building, it required a computer to do the design work, because the reactor was complicated, and we managed to get that done well. But I got interested in the computers, and the popularity of everything nuclear sort of wore off after a while, and things slowed down in the nuclear reactor business. So when General Electric decided it was tired of paying all this money to IBM for its big computers, and that it was, with all the experienced people it had across General Electric, they were going to try to get into the computer business themselves. And they decided to build a computer that was a General Electric computer rather than renting all those big, expensive engineering computers from IBM. And I ended up being put in charge of that project and moving to Phoenix. And that was a mistake. So you have, do I regret something? Yes.
In what way?
The move to Phoenix was a very difficult and basically unsuccessful part of my career, the only one. And it was very tough on Joan. She has always regretted that move and never let me forget it.
But what was it work-wise that didn't work?
Well, General Electric bit off more than they could chew.
Oh, okay.
And so General Electric, although we built the computer that we went down to build, and in those days, engineering computers filled a room maybe 6 times the size of this one, and lived in an air-conditioned environment with a false floor over all the cables running back and forth between the big boxes. And the thing you have on your hip is a lot more powerful than what that was.
I was just gonna say, yeah, and it's,
So there's been dramatic changes.
Yeah, I've seen like movie representations of.
But we did build what we intended to build, which is a computer that could be used by General Electric's engineering organizations in various places instead of renting from IBM.
Mm-hmm.
And it did work, but it certainly had difficulties. And so GE thrashed about with its philosophy of professional management, that you could be, with the right skills, you could manage anything. And to give them credit, that worked fine in a lot of ordinary businesses. It does not work in brand new businesses where everything's changing over the short time. And so uh, brought in and ruined the career of quite a few of their brightest young executives by passing them through the computer business. And I managed to stay alive and continue to contribute, but ended up running the advanced technology portion of that business, which by then had a French and Italian affiliate. So I had sort of a worldwide portfolio there. But when an opportunity came along for me to get out of the computer business, I jumped at it. So it was uncomfortable and difficult, and GE really didn't have its heart to get into the computer business. And, well, it sold all kinds of parts to people like IBM. And so it was a mixed enthusiasm that you were competing against
Your customers.
some of the parts businesses. So-
You went to Bendix? Was that the?
So I was
Okay.
recruited by Bendix. It's interesting, if you don't mind rambling on this.
No, please.
Uh, everybody that begins to develop any kind of visibility starts getting phone calls from headhunters, from recruiters, which typically start out as, well, tell me about yourself. I've got an opening here. And finally one came along and said, I have an opening here that I think you might be interested in. Don't bother telling me anything about yourself. I know all about you. And that was the right way of, in any case, that was Bendix.
Yeah.
And the move to Bendix, which was sort of one too many for Joan, nonetheless I would do again. In fact, I would do all the moves except for the one to Phoenix, which was difficult for me and difficult for Grandma.
Well, wait a
and
minute,
Joan.
we're missing one. So was Weston also GE?
Yes.
Part of the G, oh, okay.
No, wait a minute.
Because Weston was
Westport was part of,
Westport or Weston?
Both.
But Weston
Because
was
it went
later.
Phoenix to Westport.
Westport to
That was
Weston.
GE. And then Honeywell bought
Oh, right, okay.
GE Strategic Planning Group. One of the members of that group was a friend of mine, so I had certain visibilities that most people didn't get. But GE was having struggle, was putting money into this business and putting key executives in there and wasn't getting where it wanted to get. And so the strategic group decided correctly that the guy who got out of the computer business first got the best deal. Because later, those guys, in those days, people like RCA thought they were going to build computers, and I forget how many others, but the field generally was referred to as IBM and the Seven Dwarfs.
Was Burroughs was part of that?
Burroughs
too?
was one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Burroughs was a little different case, but that's a separate
Well, they had a
discussion.
very specialized computer, didn't
A very different computer,
they?
and a very brilliant computer, 20 years ahead of its time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Where was Bendix? Is that in California?
Here,
Oh, here. Oh. So
that
wait.
was moved here.
Yeah.
Well, you're
So
thinking earlier, I think.
Well,
So
we
we-
were talking earlier, and then Bendix was after all of this.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we moved with General Electric to Westport, from which I was running this worldwide
Westport,
advanced development organization. And then GE, having decided it was going to get out, sold its computer business to Honeywell. And having moved my family so much, I tried to stay in Westport. And they were even good enough to build an office for me down by the railroad station and all of that. But it didn't work. So I had to move to the headquarters of the Honeywell computer business, which was in Waltham, Massachusetts.
Yeah,
What
28.
year was that? What year was that, Grandpa?
Hmm?
Do you know what year that was? Or roughly?
Would have been roughly 72,
And how long were you there?
2.5 years.
The only reason I asked is that I called on Honeywell in '76, or it's actually '77.
Yeah, I
So
was gone.
we
I was
missed-
gone by
We
then
missed each
because
other.
I came here in '74.
Yeah. But was Cy Kraus? Cy Kraus? Cy
I
Kraus?
know Cy Kraut.
Yeah, Cy
Yeah,
Kraus
I
was
know
here.
about. I knew him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I was right. It looked like by moving to the headquarters of a company, I had a good chance of not having to move again. No, that was wrong, but I still managed. Well, they sold the company out from under
Oh,
me.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I would do the move to here was a correct step and better for Joan because we stayed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was one major regret was that the Phoenix thing worked out badly for everybody, for GE, for me. I managed to survive it all, and I was treated well by both GE and Honeywell, but it was difficult. Difficult when GE in its desperation sends in teams to audit what's going on in the computer business and sends in perfectly capable people who know nothing about the computer business. And you just sit there and grind your teeth.
The one weird thing is that Grandpa's boss at Bendix, Bill Agee, right, originally used to walk Cousin Lou to school in Idaho.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? I hadn't heard that one
Yeah.
before.
In
Sure.
Idaho? Yep.
Yeah, Bill
Wow.
Agee came from Idaho.
Is that weird?
It's a very How did that happen?
Did Bill
I'm
Agee,
sorry,
did
how
Bill
many-
Agee know you before
Yeah, how many
then?
people are in the
No.
world?
Yeah, how many people are on
No.
the planet at this point?
What?
I said, how many people were on the planet at this point? Because it seems like it was like 4.
It's amazing. It's amazing how many times things like that happen. No?
Yeah, it's crazy.
No, you're right.
Right? Yeah, I remember Lou saying, oh yeah, Bill Agee used to walk me to school.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Who was the best boss you ever worked for?
I've worked for,
Joan. No, sorry.
I've worked for a lot of bosses. I used to keep a log because I used to tell them that having me working for them is bad for their health because I seem to get a new boss every 18 months, something like that.
Oh, jeez. You outlasted them all.
I've had a lot of nothing bosses.
Mm.
Oddly enough, well, I guess I've had a couple that tried to help me. Most of them, talk about developing your people, but most of them weren't interested. But I had one physicist boss who was helpful, and surprisingly enough, when I volunteered to set up the computer organization that would support our atomic energy business, I ended up working for the head of finance of that division, and he was as surprised to have a physicist working for him as I was surprised to have an accountant
guy.
and
Bean
financier
counter.
as a boss. But he tried hard to be helpful, and so I've always been grateful to him.
What's your favorite job you've ever had?
I'm sorry?
What's your favorite job you've ever had? Or like thing that you've done at a job?
I think the time early in GE's entry into the nuclear reactor power business, it was a brand new business. We had to move to California because that's where they set up the division. But that turned out to be a good move, and Joan was happy. And I was doing creative things and doing some pioneering, which is always exciting, trying to do something that the rest of the world had never done before. And applied a lot of the lessons I had learned along the way so that I was able to stay out of trouble. And the reactor worked. And so...
That was the world's first, right?
Of its particular type, that was the world's first. But it did work, and quite a few others were built after I left the business. No, that was very satisfying, very rewarding, and you have this feeling that you really knew what you were doing, and as a result could push the boundaries and get into new territory and tell other people what they needed to do. It was probably the most enjoyable part of my career.
What was your favorite trip that you ever took?
Well, Joan and I agreed on what the favorite was. It was Indonesia.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty weird, but it was a good trip. It was well organized. The guy who shepherded us around was a Japanese engineer who took his vacations by taking tourists around on trips like these. But he was one jump ahead of everything, so that it worked well. And the people and the customs and the whole scene in Indonesia was fascinating. And you were convinced you were on another planet. It's just that different.
If you were able to go back and talk to your younger self and give some advice, what would you give?
Stay out of the computer business.
Yeah, that's easy. Besides that.
Anything like non-career related?
Yeah.
Really can't come up with anything. I don't have many regrets.
It's impressive.
I would say maybe not taking your young children to the slaughterhouse.
Yeah. Okay, that probably would be
Let me emphasize that one, Grandpa. We've talked about that. That's come up on occasion.
Yeah.
and,
I've heard about that
I,
multiple
uh,
times.
that was like, what did he do?
That was probably a mistake.
Yeah.
What was he thinking?
Don't know.
What was he thinking? Kids ought to know where meat comes from.
And that's fine.
And now
The
you don't eat it.
supermarket.
And now I don't eat it. Yeah, basically.
And now I'm having
I don't eat cow.
That was not smart, but
It was well intended, but yeah.
yeah, but
Well,
that's
Less
a good
scars.
as I
a
said,
good one to
You have one.
avoid.
The theory was good. The implementation needed some.
The implementation was all right. We didn't have any problems, but the impact was something I didn't think about enough.
There could have been alternatives.
Yeah.
Now you have one child who doesn't eat meat and one child who works with meat.
And that's about all she eats is meat. All she can eat is meat and potatoes.
Did you
I
take
don't know
both
where she
kids?
finds anything to eat.
I know.
Did you
Yeah.
You took both kids
Uh-huh.
at the same time?
Yeah. And
Linda was
look, I
So
think
Linda,
was
so how
7.
old? Linda was 7?
Like 7? Must have, wait.
How old were
It
you?
was Arizona, right?
Yes.
So I was 1 to 7 years old. Oh my God. What did you do? She was like 2. Yes. She was like 2 or 3.
Well,
Yes.
the good news is
Oh,
that,
I didn't realize she was that little.
well, but a
It
2-year,
had to have been 1 to 7. Yeah, it was after Schenectady. No, wait a minute. Hold on.
It was after San Jose.
After so, and that was 4 years. Okay, so hold on. So that was for 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 11. So she was maybe 6,
We were in
5
San,
or 6.
we were in
right?
San Jose 7 years.
Yes, and then Phoenix. Arizona for 4.
Mhm.
So
So
I
you-
was 1 to 7 in California, 7 to 11 in
So she was like
She was
5
back
years.
was
6 years old.
so
5
that's
or 6
actually,
years old.
She must have been
that's
what?
5 or 6.
that's actually worse than a 2-year-old because a 2-year-old,
Remember a little.
Yeah,
I don't know what's
she'll at
going on,
least
but a
remember.
6-year-old kind
I
of knows
remember
what's going
traumatic
on.
things from when I was 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a good piece of advice.
I still see parts of that.
I didn't even see it myself, and,
And
I,
I
see
see-
parts
yeah,
of it.
I do too.
Yeah.
I remember
Sorry,
the
ladies. That was a mistake.
You're allowed one.
Only one though.
I can't think of any others.
I remember hearing about that. And I was like, what?
I think you told. I think you thought you already told me. I think
Yeah.
that happens a lot. Like you guys think you already tell me things because you tell her.
No, she hadn't told me about it either. She told both of us at the same time.
She did.
I think
Well,
it was at Thanksgiving.
I feel
What,
like,
the
but this
slaughterhouse thing?
Yeah. It happens a lot though. Like you'll tell her something or you'll tell him something, and you won't have told me, but you'll think that you already told me, and it'll just come up in conversation. And I'll be like, "What did you just say?" No one told me. Because I remember having that reaction the first time we talked about it. I think I was like, what happened? Yeah.
Mhm.
That happens a lot.
What other hobbies and stuff did you develop outside of work that you really enjoyed?
You know what? One thing I remember you doing, but I don't know. You gave it up a long time. Is building airplane models.
Yeah.
Like there was a gray army airplane that you built with army stickers on it, and I used to love to watch you put that stuff together.
Didn't do that much of that.
Maybe not. I
But,
just
but I
remember
did do
that.
some.
It's funny, my dad built a boat.
But to answer your question,
Banjo.
I was a performing magician at one
Oh
point.
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I have no idea how I got started in magic.
Want to see his cape?
Yeah,
I think it's still.
But you actually have a cape?
actually,
Black on the outside and red lines.
quite a nice cape,
It
in
is
fact.
very nice.
And it must have been made while I was still quite young and yet tall enough because it still fits.
Yeah.
And my mother, who had a seamstress come in periodically to do whatever was needed in fixing up clothes, asked her to make a cape. So I got a cape. I'm not entirely sure that the cape wasn't made for some sort of a Sunday school pageant before I got into magic.
Oh really?
I don't remember.
Okay.
But in any case, somewhere along the way, I have no memory. I guess I mentioned Joel Cass a little while ago. I know he and I were both into it together. So that would have been at the beginning of, at 7th grade, let's say, something like that. And I gradually collected equipment and knowledge, and ended up performing several times at my high school, or at social functions related to the high school. It wasn't physically at the high school. And I even performed, I remember, at least once and maybe twice during college in the student union, in one time with the help of my brother Tom, who, much to my surprise, was very helpful. Did his part perfectly. And somewhere about the time I got towards the end of college, the luster went off of all of this somehow. And but I learned a lot from it. I learned about performing in public or speaking in public, and I'm comfortable to this day doing that, which was very helpful in a lot of other environments. Whether I was any good, I have no way of judging, but eventually I sold all the remains of my stuff and to some guy in Lower Manhattan somewhere. So that was one. And then I had a career in fencing.
Oh, yeah.
I started that in high school. Again, I have no memory of how it started, but I enjoyed it. And
You did that through college, didn't you? Or in college?
and I very definitely did that through college with some quite success. Again, this is right after the end of World War II. But MIT put together a fencing team. It was only, I think, 4 of us, at least one year. But we managed between us. We had meets with serious fencing play. We fenced Army and Navy and Brown University and Boston College and I forget who all else, but and we had an undefeated season.
Oh, wow.
So
I don't know if I knew that.
that was fairly special. And I enjoyed it. It was a place where you were encouraged to be ferocious without hurting anybody.
How would you describe your childhood?
Well, Joan used to always comment about the pictures that were taken of me in my childhood, and she always wondered why I was never smiling. You remember that too?
Yep, I do remember that. I remember the
Yeah, I
comment,
feel like
yeah.
I do too.
Well, you weren't really. I mean, from the pictures that I saw.
No, that's
you
true.
weren't.
That's true. I don't remember the childhood as being sad or difficult or anything like that. We got to know a group of other boys, not necessarily from the same school, because in those days when you lived in the middle of Manhattan, there were guys who made a business of putting together what were called groups. And so in the afternoon,
Social groups?
mostly for sports,
Oh.
so he would collect his 6 or 8 or 10 guys, and we'd go out into Central Park in some open place and play ball or whatever. And so that was how you spent your afternoon until you get old enough, and then intramural sports at your school took over. But
Did you go to the public schools or private school?
I went to private school.
Horseman.
Yeah. private school, starting at kindergarten all the way up through high school. All of that Horace Mann.
Is it still around?
I think so. Parts of it.
Hmm?
I think parts of it are still around, right?
I don't know.
I think
I'm
so.
totally
What's it
out of
called?
touch.
Horace
Look it up.
Mann, two
Horace.
N's. Horace, Horace.
Well, he was a 19th century educator, so the school was named after him.
Let's see. There's an
I
insurance
think
corporation.
It used to be Horace Mann School for Boys, but not long after I left, it was made co-ed, and I don't recognize it.
Did they have a particular specialty, or was it just a general project?
Just general.
It says it's still open.
Yeah, I thought so.
Could be,
He was.
but it's open as a co-ed high school.
Well, this is
It's
dedicated to teaching students in nursery through grade 12.
Oh, wow, still.
Hmm.
Huh.
It's funny because it says in his Wikipedia that he was known for his commitment to promoting public education. They founded a private school in his name. He was on the Secretary of the Massachusetts State Board of Education. He was in the U.S. House of Representatives.
This is Horace Mann himself. Hmm.
Antioch College, he was the president of. I've never heard of it.
Could be, yes. I think it still exists too.
Let me see.
Antioch
Annie-
College.
Antioch,
In
like,
Ohio.
oh, because there was an Antioch, Tennessee.
No, it's in Yellow Springs, Ohio. It says it's still around. Interesting. Okay.
Fascinating.
But fencing was very enjoyable. It was MIT hired a guy to be our coach who had fenced in the 1938 or 9 Olympics
Damn.
and taken second place in foil and he always maintained he was gypped. He should have that he had won it, but the politics had gotten in the way. Anyway, but he was good, and he was a good coach.
They didn't have the electronic systems that they have.
No.
today.
So we, when you got into a match, they used phenolphthalein. You know what that this is a chemical that changes color when you change its pH. So you put a little spot of phenolphthalein on the end of your foil, and when you hit, it leaves a spot of pink, and then they come along with a little vinegar, and it turns back to colorless, and you go on. These days it's all electronic, but none of that had started when we got good enough to, as I said, to have an undefeated season and to fence in the collegiate nationals at least once, maybe twice.
Did you ever want to go to the Olympics?
What?
Did you ever want to participate in the Olympics or
No.
try out? No.
No. And unfortunately, you'll be amused. By and large, after I left college, I did fence a little during graduate school. Cornell had a team, and so I went up and worked with them occasionally. But of course, in graduate school, as you're finding out, there isn't a lot of spare time. It's work. It is a different environment. People are there because they want to learn rather than because their parents wanted them to go or whatever. So it's a different environment. But certainly after college, there was no way for me to continue. And so it just all sort of evaporated, and I sold or gave away my gear. But somewhere along the way, probably while I was still at MIT, I was home at my parents' home during the holidays one year. And I decided I'd go down to the fencing club I'd heard of that was active in New York. And so I went down carrying my gear and introduced myself, and they were very polite and pleasant to see me, and we talked. And so they said, would you like to try a match? So I said, sure, and got suited up. And they introduced me to this, I guess I'd call her a dumpy blonde female, who we squared off, and she took 5 points off of me and said, thank you, Mr. Weil, and left. And here I'm this hotshot collegiate fencer. So that takes you down a notch or two.
Those would be young.
She was good. So the fencing career sort of died out about the time we moved to California and has gone completely.
She probably threw a little bit of cold water on that too, right?
No, it was perfectly polite about it. And
No.
No.
I'm talking about the any dreams or
Oh, I
desire
didn't
you
have
had to
any.
pursue it.
I didn't have any desires. It didn't fit with what I was doing then, and so as far as I'm concerned, it was gone. The other thing that you probably don't know about me is that I was a tuba player.
I forgot about that too.
So you play every instrument.
No, really only 3 that I've ever really touched. Well, 4, I guess. I took 3 years of piano lessons because that's what my parents thought I should do. And I wasn't either bad at it or good at it, and wasn't entranced, and after 3 years that was that. My younger brother, on the other hand, turned out to have real talent. And so Peter, I greatly enjoyed his piano playing, but he actually got to the point of performing a Grieg concerto with an orchestra at one point. So Peter was good.
He had,
I
didn't
didn't
he
know
have like
that.
a 2-octave handspan?
Certainly not 2
I
octaves.
thought he did.
But he
Can't
had-
be 2 octaves.
He had big hands.
Yeah, very big hands.
And
What
he
are the
was,
4 instruments?
well,
Piano, banjo.
piano, tuba,
Oh,
guitar, and banjo.
you forgot one.
Mandolin.
Timpani.
I had a one-night career as a timpani player.
Timpani's hard because it goes out of tune very quickly. So if you watch timpani players like in an orchestra, they're
Yeah.
constantly
Mhm.
like
Tuning it up.
tuning
yeah.
it up like in between
Yeah.
movements
Yeah.
and stuff, but they have to do it so quietly because they're doing it while everyone
Right.
else is playing.
Mhm.
So they're just
Grandpa
like,
was asked to play timpani once, right?
There was an amateur production of Gilbert and Sullivan's Pinafore near where we were working at Brookhaven National Laboratory that I mentioned earlier. And Bob Margulies, one of our guys, was a clarinet player and a good one. And so he was playing in the orchestra there. And he came and he knew of my love of Gilbert and Sullivan. And so one day he came back and said, they're desperately looking for a timpani player. And you know the Pinafore backwards and forwards. Why don't you come and play timpani? I said, I've never done that before in my life. But I did, or at least for half the performance. And about midway into the thing, a professional drummer showed up with his trap drums and things. But clearly he knew, first of all, much better than I did, and second of all, he knew I would have known I was faking it. So, I don't think I ever finished the performance. But that was my career as a timpani player. And the guitar I just fooled with mostly during college. This was during the big folk revival, and so I played well enough to play along with our singing, and so that was a lot of fun, but I was never any really good at it. But the tuba is another story. I guess I got involved somehow with the elementary school band, and I remember doing a little playing of a trumpet, and then somehow I got moved to the tuba probably because they needed a tuba player, and I guess I must have been good enough so that I remember on some parents' night I soloed on the tuba for a song called "Asleep in the Deep," which I know nothing about. But and then when I got to high school, I never touched the tuba for the entire 6 years in high school. But somewhere along my career in college at MIT, they were putting together a band, not a marching band, but just a band. And so I decided once upon a time I knew how to play a tuba, so I explored that. And that turned out to be a great deal of fun and had a considerable impact on me. First of all, they hired as our teacher a grizzled old trumpet player who had played with John Philip Sousa.
Oh my good. What?
That's great.
Wow.
Very big
Yeah.
music person.
Yeah, I know who that
I don't know what you know about music. I'm not.
So
I know they know things about music. I don't know what you know
I
about
know
music.
John
there was a movie about it, you know.
I haven't actually seen the movie, but I know.
Yeah. Okay.
There is a movie about it? No.
Sure.
What?
Music Man.
That's loosely based on him.
It's
No.
not about him.
I was gonna say, I don't
It's
think
loose.
that's-
I don't know what you know about music.
I don't think that has any
John
relation to
Philip
Okay.
Sousa.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
It's good music, and it was fun,
Yeah.
but not Sousa. So we played a lot of, I just remembered something. We played, we met, I don't know, once a week or something like that. Played a lot of all the standard marches and things. And out of that, I came to love the music and enjoy it, and I still do. So if you listen to what I play for myself upstairs, there will be sessions when I will play nothing but marches. So I still enjoy that.
Oh.
But we were not a marching band. First of all, there weren't that many of us. Must have been 20 all told, something like that. But we decided to get out and try marching one day. So here we are in the MIT quadrangle. That big MIT main building is U-shaped and against the river over here. And then we're out in the middle of that. But I'm here with my tuba this way, with the bell over here to my right. And somehow I got placed in the front row to the left, which means I can't see the other guys because the bell's in the way. And sure enough, we marched down the field a little bit, and the whole band turned right, and I didn't. Because I didn't see anybody. I didn't know what was going on over there. So that was great fun. But I ended up with a love of real band music. Now I say that because bands will try performing anything, and most of the time it's like a dog walking on its hind legs. It's remarkable that it can do it at all, but it isn't beautiful. But music, the music that's written for bands, and particularly the marches, which I love, I still listen to. So that stuck. And then the banjo I picked up, I guess first when we were in California.
I was gonna say Arizona, but you're probably right.
Might have been Arizona, not sure. Only because I was intrigued by by the complicated accompaniment patterns that the banjo plays in bluegrass. And of course, the 5-string banjo is an irrational instrument to begin with, because that 5th string is in the wrong place and is set so you almost never fret it. So, but I've kept up with that until the last couple of years. I have it upstairs, and at one point I keep telling myself to pick it up and see if I can get back into it. I haven't done that yet, but we'll see. But I did and got good enough so that I could play recognizable music, and I enjoyed it. But I've also found, as a part of that, what a limited form of music bluegrass is. And anybody who, as it turns out, becomes a virtuoso on the 5-string banjo leaves bluegrass, looking for broader territories, and they end up playing all kinds of things, but including classical. But there just isn't enough depth and variety to bluegrass itself. But it is the rhythm of the bluegrass banjo that attracted me originally.
Chad, our accompanist at the high school, is starting to learn the banjo.
Oh, really?
He's been posting little videos of him like trying it. I mean, he's been playing for like maybe a month. Probably not even that, but he's been like posting some videos of him like tinkering around on the banjo. He's like a virtuosic piano player, organist. So
Now, is he learning 4-string or 5-string?
That I don't know, actually. I didn't even look.
He's amazing. I watch he's on Instagram a lot. He posts a lot of things on Instagram. Does a lot of improv, and I'm mesmerized by him every time.
He's been playing for decades now, and he played on Broadway when he was in his teens, played Radio City Music Hall in his teens. Like, he's been very good for a very long time. So, I'm not totally surprised that he's able to pick up the banjo pretty quickly from what I've seen, which is impressive.
There are a variety of different kinds of banjos and different kinds of banjo players. We had a couple that we were very friendly with here. And the man's father turns out to have been quite a famous 1920s Dixieland banjo player. So Lou Black's father was a well-known banjo player. And because Lou wanted me to copy and make some different kinds of recordings for him of the music he had from his father, I kept copies of his father's playing. He was remarkable. He played some beautiful things.
On a totally separate subject, Grandpa, your dad was very active in a lot of different things, political, religious, and everything. Yet none of the boys seem to have picked up on any of that. Any thoughts about that?
Interesting question, yes. Yeah, he was very active in the Boy Scouts, especially during the war in the Jewish Welfare Board, and as a part of that, then in the founding and development of the USO.
He founded the USO.
He helped found. He was one of the people that helped found the USO.
I remember doing a project on our...
That's right.
Yeah, and he was head of the Jewish Welfare Board, at least for part of the time. Well, I guess the observations I'd make is that he grew up in New York City, was a lawyer in New York City, and that whole environment and milieu was a natural part of what he did, and he was very charitably inclined, and so he got involved in these things. And they came and went. Boy Scouts were very important to him early on. Later in life, they sort of faded into the background. Yeah, JWB in particular got to be major activity.
Mm.
When Peter got his law degree, he started working at my father's firm. After my father died, I'm sorry to say, but he's worked there for a while and subsequently in another firm. And Peter started being active doing these kinds of things too.
Mm.
But Peter moved to Larchmont, out of the New York City part. And I think geography has a lot to do with it. With all my moving around, there was never a chance to get completely dug in. I served on the United Fund Board in Phoenix. But you serve on it, and then 3 years later you're gone.
Mm.
And you have to start over again to know the people and the local culture. So why didn't I do it here now that I've been here 50 years? I don't have an answer for that.
Mm.
Joan was never big on charities at all.
That's what I was gonna say.
Really? Why?
Let me speculate a little. When Joan was growing up, about the time she got to begin to be a teenager, I guess, her father developed diabetes and with some mental complications, and lost all his money and his business. He was a furrier.
Did you know that Barry's dad
He was an operator, but he
in the fur business also in New York?
He sewed minks together and stuff. Like, he didn't own a place or anything, but he worked in the fur. He was a furrier for many years.
I didn't know that.
Weird. Anyway, sorry.
So Joan's mother, as a response to that, got some support from her family, but also followed up on her interest in hobby and did some studying and became an interior decorator.
Mm-hmm.
And she did well at it. Turns out she had talent. And so that was a career. But the point of my story is that just about the time Joan grew up and began being conscious of things like money, they had a family crisis involving money. And ever since, money has been a fixation of hers. Is that saying it fairly?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. So, 2 foot. One, I do remember her saying that, so Grandma Ray had to go work to support the family, but they tried to keep up appearances.
Mm-hmm.
So I do kind of remember that, and I could be wrong here, but they had an L in the foyer, in the floor, right? Like brass or something, and that Grandma Ray, when they didn't have company over, would cover it so it wouldn't get scratched up or messed up somehow. So they were trying to keep up appearances, but also I do remember Joan saying years ago, I was playing green stamps and blue stamps. You collected from the grocery store, I think, stamps that you got after you bought a certain amount of
Green stamps.
green
Yeah.
stamps.
Yep.
Like you bought $50 worth of stuff, they gave you a page of green stamps, and you collected that and pasted it into pages of these books.
Mm-hmm.
And when you had a book finished, you could trade it in for either cash or
Mhm.
something.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Joan saying that, it feels weird to call her Joan, but anyway, I'll get used to it. At one point, she had, as a child, was collecting the green stamps in these books, and they disappeared. And she figured that her mother took them and, was using that to help pay for things. And some uncle or something gave her a bracelet, and apparently, I don't think it was diamonds, but it was a good bracelet, and that also disappeared at one point.
I never heard either of those.
Yeah, I
Okay.
remember those two things. So
Mhm.
my point is that they were struggling, I think, financially,
Mhm.
but they were not very open about it, and she probably felt the
Mhm.
pressure.
Mhm.
And plus, her mother went to work. How many women worked in those days,
Mhm.
really? And the question I have for you is: you mentioned that her father, when he got diabetes, there were some mental issues. What were those?
No, it just apparently diminished his competence. Nothing more than that I know of.
Okay.
So that he wasn't able to run his business as well.
Oh, okay. No, I was just wondering if there was some connection, mental health wise,
There might be.
with
still.
her father and her.
There still might be.
Yeah.
It's all possible, but I don't know.
Okay.
Was her problem with donating to charities, or like volunteering to charities, or just charities?
She didn't like.
Money.
I do remember she didn't like, and I remember you were also doing some free work
Oh, I
for some
remember that.
organization
Consulting.
when you were still working,
Mhm.
and she hated that because you weren't getting paid for
Right.
it.
Right.
Really?
So, oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
I remember
She
that.
gave you such grief about that. Didn't want you doing any of that if you weren't getting paid for it.
Weren't
Yeah.
weren't you on a board too or something, and you weren't getting paid for that or something? There was something
Well,
around
when
it.
later on when we were here,
Yeah.
I served on a couple of boards, but I got paid for those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or either that or I'm trying to remember.
But there was was there
I-
some organization with young boys that you were helping get either
I don't
more
remember it, but it
education or
sounds
something?
likely.
Yeah. And she
Yeah.
did not want you doing any
No.
of that because you weren't getting paid.
And with her background, or at least I'm speculating
Yeah.
on his background. I'm hardly a psychologist, but I've always felt that it was that
Rooted
made
there.
her so conscious
Yeah.
of money.
Yeah.
So that made it hard to do charitable work.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, the two boards I served on were businesses, so they're
Okay.
except for the one in Phoenix, which was a United Fund board. If you don't mind my rambling on
Please.
Please.
things that pop up in my
I'm
memory,
learning all kinds of things
Yeah.
I've never heard
This is
about
great.
before.
that United Fund board in Phoenix, as its proper job, would review each of the agencies that it supported, probably once a year. So you'd bring the board or the officers of that agency in and have them review the situation and the finances and whatnot. One of in Phoenix, being Phoenix, had I forget its proper name, but it was it's basically a meeting house in the city for Native Americans who were off the reservation and were sort of lost in civilization and wanted some place to find others and to just crash. And so the Indian Agency, whatever its proper title is, one day I remember came very personable, probably full-blooded Native American, came down and gave us a review of what the agency did in its finances, all of which I have only a blurry memory of until I get to the end. And we thanked him for coming down. And he in return thanked us and said, "It's always a pleasure to come down here and talk to you immigrants."
I mean, he's got a point.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why he said
Fortunately, the
Yeah.
board took that in exactly the way it was intended, and
Oh.
the place broke up in laughter. But as you say, he had a point.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that was
That's pretty
That is
gutsy.
ballsy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it.
yeah, we all loved it.
That's great.
If you could have a career in something different from what you had a career in, what would you think you'd want to do?
marching band to.
I've always been interested in science and engineering.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I had some talent in math and in chemistry in high school. I suffered through high school physics, which is inherently boring, but managed.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know what I wanted to do in science, but I knew I wanted to do something there. And so when my father took me around to visit colleges, and at MIT, you have to sign up for some sort of a major. And when he spotted business and engineering administration, what was then, there was no business school at MIT at the time, so that was as much of business as there was. He strongly suggested signing up for course 15 and see what develops. And but I never really thought seriously about any other path or any other kind of a career. I started out thinking about chemistry until I got to organic chemistry.
Yeah, I've been there.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
And I did not like all the memorization.
No. Oh
Yep,
my God,
That's
yeah.
how I felt.
So, and at just about that same time, they set off the bomb at Hiroshima, and nuclear physics was suddenly in. And so I basically overloaded with whatever physics was available that I could take. And so I finished in course 15, but so my degree reads Science and Engineering Administration, I guess it was called. Now that course grew into the Sloan School eventually, but
Yeah, I am familiar with it. Yeah.
yeah, but that made it a little awkward at two levels when going to graduate school, because you could look at that as sort of a dilute science, and it also meant that there were some basic corners of physics that I hadn't done as much of, and so I found them difficult and never did really get comfortable with them. I don't know whether you had transmission lines wouldn't probably mean much to you, but that was a corner of physics that I managed to pass what I had to pass there, but it never got comfortable with it. There were 2 or 3 of those that probably were a result of not having had a physics undergraduate degree.
Did you ever watch the Oppenheimer movie?
No, but I still will.
I would love to hear what you think of it and what you remember versus what they're portraying, etc. So
Yeah.
Particularly the character that Robert Downey Jr. played.
That you supposedly met.
yeah, that
Yeah.
you do.
What was the character?
Is he a governor?
Yeah.
Did he play the general?
No.
No, he was the one who took Oppenheimer to court.
Oh, Louis Strauss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew Louis Strauss. He was a friend of my father's, a distant friend of my father's, but
Well,
none.
they portray him as, excuse my language, an asshole in the movie. Was he an asshole? That you remember?
I had an extended conversation with him once in his office,
Okay.
and then met him by accident in the parking lot at Brookhaven. My memory is of an arrogant man,
Mm-hmm.
strong, intellectual, but haughty and arrogant.
Yeah.
And he caused Oppenheimer a whole lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, they definitely portrayed that in the movie, but
I think,
Yeah, I'll be interested to see.
Yeah, you should watch it. It'd be interesting to see if, like, the sequence of events is true to history or not, from what you can tell and remember.
You
but-
didn't ever run into Oppenheimer, did you?
No, I never met him.
So
But
who-
as I told you earlier, the whole group from
Yeah.
Los Alamos, which was the group around Oppenheimer,
Yeah.
came to Cornell and were
What was the guy who was your thesis advisor at first?
Robert Wilson, Robert R. Wilson.
I'm gonna write that down and do some research later.
Well, they all.
But
He
John-
might be in the movie.
But there was John Dwyer and my
I think Wilson.
advisor, Boyce McDaniel. They were
He
all,
also had Einstein in there at one point. Brief. Yeah.
yeah, I never met him either. But I sure heard because these guys were all around who they called Oppie.
Oh, yeah.
They
Oppie?
respected him,
Huh.
but, and they talked about him. I guess I was in graduate school when all this was going on with the hearings.
Maybe I should just look up the cast because it'll say the names
Yeah.
of who was in the
Yeah, I already have it pulled up actually. Here. So who are all the famous people that you met? Is my question.
Yeah, Louis Strauss was
I feel like there's a whole cast of.
In the movie, did they pronounce it Strauss or Straws?
I watched it on a plane, so I probably couldn't hear it very
I
well.
think it was Strauss. but I'm
Yeah,
not
I
sure.
think.
It's just
Because
it's
he pronounced
spelled
it Straws.
it's spelled
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah,
I think
it's
it was
spelled-
Strauss.
STRAUSS.
That's
Strauss.
fascinating because that's how.
You and I would call it Strauss, but
Yeah.
General. It wouldn't. General Leslie R. something.
Groves,
I can't say the rest of the name.
yeah.
If you turn my phone sideways, you might be able to see it.
No, the work at Los
I don't
Alamos
think
was
that's it. Yeah.
basically driven by two people. One was an Army general named
Mm.
Leslie Groves, and the other was Oppenheimer
Yeah.
for the technical work.
So it sounds like you also never met some of the folks that your father met, the famous people your father was involved with, like Truman, and I think there was one with Eisenhower,
Never met them.
and of course Einstein.
Lou, so there's a book about Eleanor Roosevelt.
Oh,
I love
this
that
story.
I love that book though.
That's such
We
a
have
good
a
book.
hard copy of it because I bought it at the bookstore.
That's the one that Eileen wrote, right?
No, it's a different one.
Okay. Anyway, really good book. I love the book. Anyway, so I was telling Lou, because she always likes to read good books also, so I recommended to her. She said, oh yeah, what was it that somebody called the house
Mm-hmm.
once? Was it at I think it was at Grandma Henry's.
I think so.
Yeah.
And she answered it, and it was Eleanor Roosevelt. She said, there's no way you could not know that
Mhm.
voice.
Yes.
So Lou actually spoke to her at one point.
Let me see. Other people in the movie were, well, Niels Bohr, but
I've heard him speak.
about him in like physics class. Oh my god. Okay.
No, he was a major figure in
Yeah.
modern physics.
I don't know if all these people were.
Although I have to
physicists.
tell you that where I heard him speak was at a conference in Geneva, an international conference on the peaceful uses of atomic energy. And he gave an evening address which was packed, but it was held in one of the old United Nations buildings, and so the whole place was set up for simultaneous translation. And Niels Bohr spoke English with a thick Danish accent, and I was at some point bored enough to be twiddling with the knobs on the simultaneous translation, and he was being translated into Russian and to French and also into English.
Oh my god! Was it accurate? Do you remember, or was it like?
It was easier to understand than his native English.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me see. A lot of senators: Albert Einstein, Isidore Rabi.
Isidore Rabi, yes,
Yeah. Did
I've met him.
Werner Heisenberg.
Werner Heisenberg, never met him,
Okay.
but a very famous guy.
Ernest Lawrence.
E.O. Lawrence, never met him either.
Okay. Luis Alvarez.
Louis Alvarez,
Louis
I know
Alvarez.
about him.
Oppenheimer. Rossi Lomanitz.
I'm sorry.
Rossi Lomanitz. That might not be. I'm just reading off the cast names. Harlan Snyder. Robert Serber. I don't know if Richard Tolman. Yeah, Leslie Groves. That was Matt Damon's character.
Oh.
The general, Leslie Groves.
That would be the general that
Yeah.
worked with Oppenheimer during the war.
Yeah. I don't know how. Concerned scientist. I don't know.
It's a character.
There's so many.
Yeah, it's an excellent movie.
They really did a
Okay.
good job with
No,
it.
I've it's been recommended, and Margot's been after me to do the same thing you said, that
Yeah,
watch it and tell her what I thought of it.
right.
Or we should watch it with you, and you can be like, I knew them. that guy. Wow.
No, during the war, as I've said, Robert Wilson was head of experimental physics at Los Alamos. A man named Hans Bethe, a Nobel Prize winner, headed theoretical physics at Los Alamos, and he also came to Cornell. So he was teaching classes that I attended.
I kind of feel like they mentioned that some of that in the movie.
Them going to Cornell?
Yeah.
Well, they talked about them going to different universities and giving
Okay.
talks, and some people were like, "You're making this up." Didn't one of them who taught at UC Berkeley, went to talk, gave a talk at UC Berkeley, and they were like, "What the hell are you talking about? This is, you're crazy." Which, I mean, usually happens when new science things come out. People are like, "You're, no." But.
Do you know who Danny Kaye was?
No.
Probably
Are you gonna explain
Oh,
what that is?
Yeah, I
Are you gonna?
Do you remember Joe down at the pizza shop?
No,
Yeah.
that's too much.
He was a
detail.
comedian, actor, entertainer, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was very famous in the 50s. And
Had his own TV show
Yep.
and stuff.
he's been in a bunch of movies. He played kind of a goofy guy usually. But he played ping pong on the family ping pong table for a while. Ping
Well,
pong
he was a
table.
client of my father's,
Yeah.
which is how this all started out.
Okay.
And then when he was having troubles with his wife, we were in Colorado for the summer, and his wife and her brother came out to Colorado and joined us, and I spent some time visiting with the two of them and showing them around a little in Colorado. Took them up to Dream Lake, I guess, or something like that, one of the lakes. And but he also came to our house, and he couldn't sit quietly, so he was always entertaining in one way or another.
What kind of law did your father practice?
Primarily personal and banking.
And is that what Weil Gottschalk and Menzies primarily is now, or?
Weil
do you know?
Gottschalk and Menzies has
Just
evolved and grown, and so I have no idea what they
I
do
think
now.
they're mostly corporate law now.
We used to be friends with one of the younger attorneys there, who Ira Milstein, who got some national attention because he got involved in some sort of a thing that hit the newspapers. Very bright and nice guy, but I think even he's retired now. So I have no connection at all to Weil Gottschalk and Menzies.
So Peter left your dad's firm at one point, and then did he start his own firm? Or he went
No. Peter, when he graduated, did the logical thing. He joined my father's firm, but my father was gone by then. And I think he stayed for a few years, but he was constantly in the shadow of my father, so to speak. And that got to him enough that at some point, I remember having dinner with Peter, and I'm not sure he was married then or not, but with Peter and Joan and I, and he was trying to bring himself to the point of leaving the firm. But he did eventually leave the firm and went to K. Scholler and had a career in primarily banking law, very successfully, wrote a book, and had a whole career at K. Scholler from there.
Did he become he was partner there?
What?
Was he a partner there?
I guess I have to say I don't know.
Sure, you could Google it. It's probably somewhere.
But he was with them until he retired. And when he retired, then he moved to Colorado.
Was going back to the travel thing, was there anywhere that you wanted to travel to that you didn't get the chance to?
Yeah, for sure. One of the other things that has been sort of a hobby since I was a young teenager at least, were the high mountains in the Himalayas. And I've read lots of histories, and my father, as it turns out, had a couple of books in his library and that I read repeatedly. And so I would love to see the real mountains. So I know the histories of the key ones, and but that's a world that's completely changed too. Because don't forget, when I grew up, none of the highest peaks in the world had been climbed.
And now it's so commercialized.
There's lines to get
Everest.
up on top of
I'm
Everest.
sorry?
There's lines of people.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
Every side of every big mountain and every ridge has been climbed. And then on some of them it's become a tourist destination, and The mountains have changed, but the mountaineers have not. And of course, the thrill of exploration was a major piece of this. You didn't know what was up there or how you were going to get up. And of course, that was all gone by the 1950s. But I still have upstairs somewhere an essay I wrote in college about whether Everest would ever be climbed.
Wow.
Have you read Into Thin Air by John Crackle?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I have.
I read that fairly recently and I really enjoyed it. I mean,
All
maybe-
those movies too that we watched not too long
Yeah.
ago. Like you saw, I told you about 14 Peaks.
I think
or
he's the
something,
one who
right? You saw
recommended it
that?
to you.
Watch that.
I haven't watched it, but you
Oh,
told me about it.
the scenery and so you've got to
Mhm.
watch that
also,
too.
this guy's insane.
Well, that's that other kid.
No, the 14 Peaks guys is
well, yeah,
insane.
he was insane too, but
They're all
insane.
they are. But that kid who would free climb,
Oh, the Canadian guy
yeah.
who died in a
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Free climbing is
free
terrifying.
climbing. Forget it.
Yeah,
No.
Those guys have to be
No.
crazy. I
Oh my goodness.
do not understand that at all.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly happy with the guys who climb with ropes and protection and whatnot. I
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah,
But
because
the
even with that, you can. It's very risky. But doing it without anything.
Nope.
Mm-mm.
Well, I don't understand the people that free climb like city buildings. Like there are people that will climb
That's
up
just
like
stupid.
skyscrapers. Why?
Because it's there.
If you
It's a
fall,
challenge.
if you
It's-
fall,
That's the
hundreds of
famous
people are
answer.
gonna
Yeah.
see you.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
If you fall, there's gonna be hundreds of people there to watch you splat.
They don't think of it that way.
No.
No, thank you.
So I grew up fascinated by all the mountains that hadn't been climbed and the stories of the guys who figured out how to get up. Some, a lot of them are easy, but some are not so easy. And so yes, that I would like to see even in this day and age, would like to actually see the big mountains. I have no desire to go to Antarctica. And so far as the civilized world is concerned, Joan and I never got, for various reasons, around to either Central America or South America. We haven't gone to either one, and I'm sure there are beautiful things to see. But that's something I had not done.
You guys went to Africa, right?
Yes,
Where in Africa?
Kenya and Tanzania. And we've also had a very good trip to Morocco, which is the other side of the desert. You thinking of going?
So there's a very competitive fellowship at my school to do because we're required to do an internship between the years in the summer and the fellowship is to do your internship in a developing country, usually meaning in Africa. And especially because there's a lot of developing infectious diseases there. That would be really, really cool, but I kind of have to know what I want to do, like, soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, so we'll see. But in an ideal world, yes, I'd like to go and do some, like, service work there and help vaccinate or do research or whatever. So, yeah.
Ooh, good luck.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll need it because it's very competitive. Everybody wants to do it. So, it's called the Downs Fellowship, but it's very, very competitive. They host like 6 sessions on how to write your grant just to apply to do it. So, it's quite a process, but yeah, we'll see.
This book I'm reading for book club, which I actually am enjoying for something different, talks about when they started the Peace Corps
Mm-hmm.
So you might, I think you'd like that book eventually, too,
Yeah.
when you.
Well, our dean, we have a new dean at the public health school, and she talked about her time in the Peace Corps.
Mm.
She did the Peace Corps, which I have thought about doing it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I think if I were to go to Africa, I'd want to do some sort of service work there when and if I go.
I'm sure there's plenty.
Oh, I know. I mean, there's so many different types of service work you can do too, and I like something I've been really thinking about too is like feminine health.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of countries that like a lot of women don't even just know how to like take care of themselves when they're menstruating, and it causes a lot of like septic shock and death.
Mm-hmm.
And so even just something as simple as teaching them how to like keep everything hygienic,
Mm-hmm.
like that would be awesome. But yeah.
Sid, another theme that runs through my life is Gilbert and Sullivan. I have seen all the plays, and when I say all, I mean all, including two of the rarely performed ones. I'm not quite sure where it started, but it started, I think, well before high school. And
Did your dad listen to it, or your
well,
mom?
he had records at home of some of the operas.
Okay.
I've
And-
only ever seen Pirates of Penzance, Gilbert and Sullivan, right?
Yes.
That's the only one I think I've seen. I saw it at the Nashville Opera last year, I believe. Not very good, but yeah. Not that the show itself is great. The performance of it was not very good, unfortunately.
But
I love their music.
I do too. I'm very fond of it, and know quite a lot of the individual operas quite well. When I was growing up in New York, the D'Oyly Carte Opera Company, which was where it all started in the UK, would come to New York probably every year, and we'd go see a few of their performances. And so I remember a man named Martin Green, who was one of their lead comic actors, I guess you could say. But was very good and very well recognized around the world, and who met a tragic fate because here's this guy who was active, and as a part of his playing his roles would end up climbing the scenery and dancing and all kinds of things. And he somehow got into an accident in an elevator, I think an automotive elevator, that was moving cars from place to place. And his legs were horribly caught and mangled. And the only person around was I think an African medical student, and he amputated both legs.
Oh.
And so here's Martin Green trying to make a career without legs.
Hey.
And that was a whole sad story.
Yeah.
But when he was alive and performing, he was quite remarkable in the way he projected his characters and moved around the stage.
You have to have good character actors for those kinds of shows.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I've hugely enjoyed Gilbert and Sullivan all along. I still do. For some years, a friend of mine and I used to drive down from here to a place in Ohio where the Ohio Light Opera Company used to put on a light opera every season, but used to include at least one Gilbert and Sullivan. And so we'd drive down 4 hours and go watch the show and then drive back But they did a good job. I can't complain. Mhm. So that's been a theme throughout my life and still is. So when I hum music to myself or something like that, it very often will be a march or it'll be a Gilbert and Sullivan somewhere.
March, light opera, bluegrass. That's quite an eclectic.
It's pretty good
mix.
spread.
What were some of your favorite shows that you saw? Like live shows?
Oh boy, that brings up some interesting memories.
Uh-oh.
One I will always remember was called, I'm pretty sure it was called Where's Charlie?, which was a musical version of the play Charlie's Aunt, which colleges and people like that all know well. Starred Ray Bolger at the time, who was a marvelous male dancer. You know him probably as the straw man in Wizard of Oz,
Yeah.
but he was also a well-known Broadway entertainer on his own. And there was one particular number in that show, which was Ray Bolger by himself, and the show just stopped. And I was afraid it would never go again. He just was that good, and the audience was simply not going to let him go. So you read about people having show-stopping moments. Well, this was one.
I remember seeing Grandma, your mom, taking me to see Annie Get Your Gun with Ethel Merman,
Mm-hmm.
and she stopped the show with one of the songs, and she actually sang it over again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes.
Well, Joan remembers when she was younger, one of her school friends, the father of one of her school friends was a publicist or something for the Broadway shows. And so she and her friend used to go to some of these shows and go backstage afterward, and she remembers meeting Ethel Merman.
Oh my
God.
goodness. She never told me that. At least not that I remember. Wow. Wow. Huh.
And I think I remembered, I don't know how these things stick in your mind,
I know.
but what she remembered particularly was Ethel Merman's eyelashes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, hey,
Were they real?
probably not.
No, probably
No.
big fake eyelashes.
No one wears real eyelashes on stage.
You look like you didn't have eyelashes.
As a total aside, if you can read an SD card, we're all set, because I was able to export it and put it in the right order. Because I renumbered all of the file names. So if you want to give it a quick try, you can
I
just
think this will read it directly.
take a quick look.
And then we should probably move it over to the hotel.
Yeah, I was about to throw you out pretty soon.
Okay.
This way we don't have to
Yeah.
go to anywhere.
Well, I don't see a card slot on this one.
Uh-oh.
But you still got your other, the other one, right?
The one upstairs I know can, but
Does that have an HDMI port?
what?
Does that have an HDMI port?
I'm pretty sure, yes.
Okay.
We should be.
Do Macs have HDMI? I doubt it.
Max, some of them do, most of them don't.
I probably
If you have a Pro,
I have an Air.
I don't think theirs. I'm like 99% sure it doesn't.
I'll have to look. I may also have an adapter that,
Well, mine has
Well, anyway, we should be good, yes, I looked at this and it's all in
It
order
might.
and stuff, so.
okay.
we're in good shape.
How about mine? But